Hi, my name's Emily Hicks, and I have a placement at Cary Elementary School in a kindergarten classroom. And one day I was working with a little boy on his letters in the hallway, and he didn't want to focus. He didn't want to learn his letters at all. So he's like running up and down the hallway as I'm trying to help him with his letters. And their classroom aide comes out, and she's like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "Nothing, because I don't want to learn my letters." And she says, "Well, don't you want to learn how to read and write?" And he's like, "No." And she says, "Don't you want to go to first grade?" And he's like, "No." So she says, "Don't you want to do anything with your life?" And he's like, "No." So she says, "Do you want me to go get Miss J?" And he's like, "No." And he starts freaking out and running even more than he was before. So she goes back into the classroom and gets Miss J, and Miss J comes out and tries to reason with him again, and she's like, "Is this how you're supposed to treat teachers?" And he says, "No." And she says, "I'm one of your teachers. Is this how you treat me?" And he says, "No." And then she says, "And Miss P, who's the aide, is one of your teachers. Is this how you're supposed to treat her?" And he says, "No." And then she goes, "Well, Miss Hicks is one of your teachers too. Is this how you should be treating her?" And he says, "No." And then she tells him to turn around and apologize. But he just stands there, so she's like, "Apologize, or you can move your color down to blue." And he says nothing. So she says, "Okay, move it to blue," and he doesn't respond. So she moves it to blue and says, "Do you want this to end up like library did last week?" And he says no and starts screaming. And she says, "Then apologize." So he doesn't say anything, so she says, "Okay, you're on red." And he still gives no response. And she says, "Do you want me to call your mom?" And he says, "No." And she says, "Then apologize." And he turns around and says sorry, and then runs back into the room, and Miss J just says, "Sometimes he's like that." For me, this was just a moment that affirmed that I had authority in the classroom, because she compared me to herself in being a teacher and how he should treat me.